Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today begins our team up deck analysis. This time it's going to be with Celebi&Venusaur Tag Team GX. Thought I'd kick off with one of the more fun and interesting deck lists, very unique, and I thought this was just complete meme tier garbage when I first picked it up. I built a list, I think it's kind of cool, played a few games with it over the last couple of days, and it's impressed me to an extent that it's worth talking about. So let's have a look. The basic concept is actually the most basic of concepts. Celebi&Venusaur is huge. 270 base hit points, so many tanking options, and like reduction cards and heal cards available to the grass stuff. That the whole idea is to make him so tanky, so awkward to knock out. His own attack helps that as well. With all his status conditions, making it awkward, forcing your opponents to keep switching out of the active and stuff, force them to retreat all the time. That's going to just really all bode well to make this guy a big old tank that sits in the active and tries to soak up hits and heal them off turn by turn. So, let's get into the list. First of all, 6 Pokemon. That is it. That is all we're playing in this build. 4 Celebi&Venusaur GX. As I said, 270 hit points as a grass type. You have 3 attacks. Pollen Hazard is a great one for the grass DC. You do 50, and your opponent's active is now burned, confused, and poisoned. So it's effectively a base of 80, seeing as though the burn and poison are guaranteed for damage. And the confusion as well is really annoying. People pretty much have to retreat out of there, otherwise they're going to continue to get poison hits. Confusion as well flips are things that never, like, people never really want to risk those, which is great. Solar Beam is brilliant. It also does 150 for that extra grass cost. That's going to be knocking out every non-GX out there pretty much. So in some matchups, like Venusaur definitely wants to face the non-GX stuff, I want to say, because you can just spam Solar Beams for one-hit knockouts, and typically the non-GX stuff is trying to like set up knockouts over like 1 or 2 hits. So being able to Solar Beam heal is really, really nice for the deck. I think you're trying to really punish non-GXs with that second attack there. An Evergreen GX for, again, 2 grass, 2 colorless, 180, and you get to heal all damage from himself. So it's like a big version of Tapu Bulu's GX attack, just in base. But if you do attach that extra energy card, you also get to shuffle all cards from your discard pile back into your deck. This can be pretty nice when you have things like Crushing Hammers, potions, more heal cards. And the amount of cycle that we have in this build, it's really not that detrimental in terms of the clunk that goes back in the deck. We have a lot of cycle cards to try and motor right back through once we've done that Lysander's trump card effect. So the Evergreen typically getting a knockout whilst also full healing and sometimes getting back even more healing and disruptive tools, which is really going to help the deck in terms of trying to fatigue the opponent. Oftentimes that is going to be our win condition, seeing as though we're chomping through attackers turn by turn, or we're going to be confusing and doing all these annoying statuses to sort of GX-based decks. We're really making it hard for the opponent to get through one Venusaur because they're having to retreat around all the time. We have Crushing Hammers and Enhanced Hammer in the list as well, and we're going to try and undo most of the damage that comes into us. So it really is a great GX attack for the build. And then we're going to be playing 2 copies of Shaymin. It just has that Floral Heal ability, healing 20 from your active grass Pokemon once during a turn. So 2 of these in play is a 40 damage heal. I don't play 3 copies because of 2 reasons. Firstly, you never want to put 3 onto your board because it then becomes a win condition that people can gust up the Shaymins and knock them out. And then they only have to get through 1 Celebi&Venusaur. And the second reason is just pricing. Oh, sorry, not pricing. It's starting it. You don't want to start it because it's really awkward for you. You'd rather start Celebi&Venusaur and get attacking a turn sooner because we don't play any switch cards other than Guzma in the list. And typically in the early turns, you need to spend searching out for things like your 4 of DC and stuff like that. So you'd rather lead a Celebi&Venusaur. It's much safer for you as well, just in case some decks can randomly like hit a Judge or a Let Loose turn 1 and you just have a Shaymin active. That's really scary and is pretty much a lost condition for this deck. So you want to reduce that as much as possible, so just 2 copies. The only downside compared to the 3 copies is the prizing issue. If you prize one of them, you're very sad that you're not able to Floral Heal 40 a turn, and it can be a big difference at times. So You can play the third copy. It's not the worst thing in the world if you do, but just bear in mind that you can pretty much never put 3 into play unless your opponent has started to, or like, unless you've already got a Celebi&Venusaur that's knocked out and one that's heavily damaged, I guess then you can go for it. But in most situations, you can't put 3 into play because it's just detrimental for you and opens up a different type of win condition for the opponent. Onto the item cards, a very unique deck, as I said. Because we only play 6 Pokemon and only 10 energy cards, we have all this space to play lots of insta-playable item cards. First of all, we have Enhanced Hammer, just a guaranteed removal of a special is really nice. Don't want to play more copies because you don't want to have too much clutter in the deck. The Crushings are always playable, be it basic energies or special energies. The Enhanced Hammer, of course, is a guaranteed removal, but it's not always playable. 2 copies of Potion, just to do a heal of 30. Now, combined with the likes of these Shaymins and the likes of Aether Paradise already reducing damage coming into you, it can actually be a big swing sometimes. These can definitely help push you out of range. And whenever we talk about these cards, remember that you have the option to sometimes recycle them back into your deck for your GX attack. So these 2 potions can be brought back via that GX attack and used once again. I'm playing 2 copies of Looker's Whistle because I'm playing a Looker's Draw Engine in here. Looker's Whistle is pretty cool. They obviously allow you to grab 2 Lookers, and I like this option. Like, you're immediately drawing 2 cards out of your deck for thinning. Looker's Whistle is also live post your GX attack because you put back those Lookers. So if you hold on to Looker's Whistle, you can guarantee yourself more supporters. And I like accumulating cards with this deck. As much as the Judge's Whistle plus Judge combo is nice, there are games where you don't need to disrupt the opponent because their deck isn't naturally good against yours. And in those situations, the Looker's Whistle plus Looker engine is great because you'll just do like, almost like Zoroark tries to just accumulate cards. So Whistle into double Lookers to then have 2 turns of decent supporters that turn is going to be nice. And also the reason I like having Looker is because we also have PokeNav in the deck to manipulate our top decks. So we're drawing from the bottom and keeping our top decks how we like them with PokeNav. So there's some slight synergy there as well. I'm going to play 1 copy of Muscle Pad. I feel like, again, you don't want much clutter in the deck at all because you want to basically keep drawing into insta-playables to try and thin for your deck quite quickly. So the Muscle Pad just goes onto one of your Venusaurs to be 50 hit points of more tank ability. And again, if it's on your first Venusaur, it gets knocked out, and your second Venusaur GX attacks, you get the reuse of it, or if it gets field blowed or whatever. So I feel like just 1 copy is fine. You can play 2 or 3 or whatever, but just bear in mind that basically your win condition is making your second Venusaur stick a lot of the time rather than the first one. That one's normally the one that does the big GX attack and heals itself, but it's more the second Venusaur that is very difficult for opponents to get through. And then the 4 ofs of all the important stuff. Crushing Hammers, of course, are really good for additional disruption. It means people can't power up things on the bench quite as easily. You're going to try and remove energies here and there. 4 copies of Netball. It can obviously grab you Grass Energy, which is huge. And in the early turns, it's going to be scouting out Venusaurs and the Shaymins. I'm playing 4 PokeNav from the original Japanese list that I saw. It was playing 4 copies of Nest Ball as well as Netball. That obviously helps you out against your Shaymin leads and improves your odds there. But PokeNav helps you scout out DCE, which I think is really huge. So scouting out DCE and also the fact that you have synergy, incredible synergy with Acro Bike and Judge's Whistle, it's amazing for you. If you're PokeNaving before either of those other 2 item cards to the right of it, you can be guaranteeing what you're drawing into and what you're discarding, and that's such great synergy for you, whilst also having the option to dig a little bit deeper into your deck to find energy cards, and the DCs are one of the key pieces here to hit on turn 2 or turn 1, as well as grass energies and just Pokemon in general. Like, the PokeNav isn't guaranteed like a Nest Ball would be, but it's so much more versatile and useful alongside these other item cards, and makes the sort of draw 1 from a Judge's Whistle much, much stronger. That's the next card, 4 copies. In matchups where you're unfavored, you're trying to just judge spam people so that they can't have nice hand sizes and they can't build to 1-hit knockouts. There are lots of 1-hit knockout decks in the format. So against those, you're trying to make sure that they can't get a full combo going and just pound through your Venusaurs. So having Judge's Whistle to recover a Judge each turn is going to be pretty important for you, in my opinion. But in matchups where you're more favored, you use it as the draw effect, and especially with the PokeNav, it's incredible for you. You can scout the top 3 and draw the best one of those 3 at least, which is really nice. And yeah, when you need to recycle a judge, you can do. The Acro Bike's also great for just more cycle through your deck. There are some cards that you don't mind discarding, obviously. Once you find like 1 or 2 of your Venusaurs, that's all you need. Excess energy cards can go. Lots of item cards can go at certain times. So just more digging deep into the deck is really nice because you can always reload yourself, which is really cool. So the Acro Bike becomes especially good the second time around because all these things like netballs become way more dead when they're shuffled back into the deck because you've already found your grass energies and your Pokemon for the most part. The supporters are also quite interesting. Again, quite non-traditional from other decks. 2 copies of Gardenia. I was shocked that Gardenia was not in the original Japanese list. Heal 80 is incredible. When you're already reducing 30, when you already have 1 or 2 Shaymins on your board, when you already have Life Forest in the list, this Gardenia is a lifesaver. It's like a second GX attack for you a lot of the time. And I think it's just an incredible card to draw into and work towards in your game because it is really just, again, just undoing turns that you've received damage for, which is what this deck is all about. Those 2 copies of Judges, obviously you can recycle them with the Whistles, which is huge. 2 copies of Guzma for Gusting. Obviously it's a low count, but oftentimes we're going to be sat in the active anyway, and we're not that free with attachments because the Venusaur does need to rack up to 5 attachments for his own GX attack. And it's not like you're going to be pivoting between both Venusaurs very often. Like, you're already winning the game if that's happening. And you'd rather not be spending retreat cards on your, like, Shaymins or whatever just to pick something off. But you can do if it's a high priority target. Then we're going to have just the 4 copies of Lillie, your best turn 1 draw supporter, of course. And 4 copies of Looker that works so well with the Whistles, obviously. And, again, you're scouting your top decks with your PokeNavs and looking from the bottom to get more cards. I think it's a similar engine to what we saw with the Tapu Koko Survivor Poison Barb deck that Carl Peters crafted, and I like incorporating it in this build because it, again, is quite unique and can really take advantage of PokeNav, which is very cool. Then for Stadiums and Energy, I've mentioned these a bunch already. Life Forest obviously is going to be a perfect fit, removing status and also 60 damage from yourself. If you can combine this with a Gardenia, it's like a reset, basically, which is awesome. Aether Paradise is the one that sticks in the game for the most part, and baits, the other field blowers and the other stadiums from the opponent, so the Life Forest can stick later down the line. But this just means that you're, now effectively 300 hit points, or effectively 350, if you already have a muscle pad attached to yourself, which is great. And then just 10 energy cards, 1 less than the one that was in the Japanese list, but I feel with the PokeNavs it kind of makes up for it. So we have PokeNav as a 4 count and 4 count of Netball to find your grass energies, so I've never found that to be too much of an issue, especially in the early turns. I'd rather be drawing cards for the most part than just having more raw energies, because you don't need them, especially if you use your GX attack to recycle, which I've said a lot about in the deck so far, as I go over to the overview just for you to see. But you don't actually need to recycle your deck in every game. There'll be a lot of situations where you're forced to heal with just 4 energies, and that's oftentimes just fine, by the way. You don't actually need to do the trump card effect in every game, but when you can get it off, it feels great, because you're recycling like Crushing Hammers, and whatever you've played, you don't mind, because the things you've played are either the insta-playable items which draw cards, or, the useful insta-plays like the Crushing Hammers and the Potions, and like Gardenias and stuff like that. Here and there, you'll get some not useful stuff, like the stuff you've thrown away with your original Acro Bikes, but that's just about the only things that are not useful. Onto the tech options. Obviously, right now, we're pretty much taking a sack to Blacephalon. I do believe the matchup would be bad even if we didn't have... right now, the matchup is unwinnable, I would say, but even if we had a Sceptile or a weakness policy, I still feel the matchup would be pretty hard. I think for Sceptile to be worthwhile, the engine of the deck needs to change quite a bit, because you've got to fit in a 2-2-1 line, probably. And we just don't have enough Pokemon search for it to be worth it, really, because they can just pick off Tricos quite easily, and we don't have enough search for basic Pokemon in the list to make it work. And weakness policy is, not the worst option. You could try and add some adventure bags and a few more tools into the list if you play 1 or 2 policy, and then 1 or 2 pads, that could work, alongside adventure bag, because that's another item that can be insta-playable and can draw cards from your deck as well. So that's something I want to experiment with, I guess, but I do think that the Blacephalon matchup would still be difficult. And then there's a few other cards that, again, I'll harp back to the Japanese list that has made the rounds, but it played a different engine where it had Professor Kukui that can make you hit 170 with your Venusaur's base attack, the Solar Beam, and it also means that you can like push against 190 hit point stuff with your GX attack, so there's definitely some utility there. And Kukui, again, has synergy quite nicely with PokeNav. If you can scout the top 3 and draw some better ones, it can work out for you. So that's something to bear in mind. And Erica's Hospitality probably does draw more than Looker in the most part. Not in the early turns. That's where I'm most worried as a Venusaur player. So that's why I'm not playing Erica, but it can in the sort of mid-game draw you more than the Lookers, so do bear that in mind. It could be an option. If you want to play like a 2 count, you can try and find space for them. Onto the matchup overview. I've put a lot of crosses here, and this is more the fact that stuff can one-shot you rather than the matchup is outright bad. I think Blacephalon is definitely bad. I think something like a Turbo Rayquaza would definitely be bad. And I feel like you actually don't have that good of a matchup against the stall variants because Zoro Control, Sylveon, and Shuckle, they all have so much energy removal that you probably won't be able to reach your own GX attack to recycle. And at the end of the day, you only play 10 energies, your attack cost is high, and your damage output is not high. If you're using your first attack, the Pollen Hazard, they're going to be able to Ace Roller all the time, so that just really sucks for you. I feel like although you're a fatigue deck on your own, you're not really quite as disruptive as a Lusamine stall deck, so that's going to be really difficult for you. And then the likes of like Ultra Malamar and Gardevoir and Vicaray, they can reach to one-shots. It's just whether you give them the benefit of time to get it going. And I actually think Venusaur is faster than a lot of people give it credit for. It's swinging from turn 2. It's able to threaten its GX attack from turn 2 as well. So like if people are just going to bring up some like basic GX Pokemon, you can just start taking prizes on them. And Rayquaza's not safe from the GX attack either, so especially with Rayquaza's like big retreat cost, it forces more things onto their board, like Zero Auras, so that's not... It's like another bench space which isn't a Ray, which kind of puts them out of range, and at the end of the day, 300 hit points is still a huge amount to get to. It's a big goal to work towards, so as long as you're a little bit careful with your attachments against like Gardevoir, and as long as you're trying to be aggressive against the Ray stuff, I think you actually still have a chance, but it's going to be really, really difficult. I think your most hard matchups are the Blacephalon and the Control stuff, but then these other decks, you do have to play quite well to win. And again, it might be down to like Judge's Whistle out like a Gardevoir early or a Vicaray for a few turns, and that can buy you enough time. And then the new matchup, which I believe will be quite difficult, would be a Pikachu Zekrom. The fact is, because they play Electro Powers, they have a lot of like burst damage from hand, so you can't really be all that... Like, you always have to be super careful that on random turns, you may even be like only have 50 damage on you, and you may not be safe because they can just like use a couple Jirachis, get a couple Electro Powers, then Volkner and Electro Power, and then suddenly they're bursting like 90 from hand out of nowhere on top of a big attack that they already have on their board, and that's going to be really horrible for you. And at the same time, you have to be worried about their GX attack, because if they can snipe one of your Venusaurs for 170 whilst also attacking your active for most likely a knockout, that's just a huge game changer. So if ever they play 2 copies of Pikachu Zekrom probably. If they use the first one to power up the second one, and then that second one comes in and powers up the first one, because of course I imagine the Venusaur is going to be doing the poison burn shenanigans to try and stop the Pikachu itself. They can then go back into that original Pikachu Zekrom and go for the 6 energy smash, and that's going to be really difficult for you to deal with. So I think those are the matchups that you've got to be a little bit concerned about, but there's a lot of other good matchups there as well. I know I've put a lot of crosses on there, and that's more sort of tentative than it is like the outright bad. I still need to test these matchups a lot more, like the Malamars and the Gardevoirs. I think they're probably closer than just outright you lose, but it's one that I need to explore a little bit more. On to my closing thoughts. I think in the right meta, this guy could be pretty good. You don't like one-hit KO decks at all. I think Rayquaza's naturally not a great play at the moment, though, just because of the amount of non-GX decks coming around. And it feels like it's that tipping point when there's just enough non-GX decks in the meta, and Zoroark decks in general, other than Zoro Control. If there's enough of those in the meta, it just makes Celebi&Venusaur a very good play. But if there's just one or two of the big one-hit KO decks sticking around, it's still like awkward territory for Celebi&Venusaur. So I don't think this will be a mainstream top-tier contender ever, because it's just naturally too easy to be countered. But I feel like it can be, you know, pick your moments, and you could hit some good metas, and there's going to be a good time for Venusaur, I think, one of these days. There's going to be one tournament where it makes a breakthrough and gets like a top 8 finish at least at one of like the big tournaments. I can definitely see that happening, but it's only when someone makes a very bold and smart meta call. The other thing I would say is that your turn 1 and 2s are quite fragile. Obviously, if you start a Shaymin, you're really in panic mode to try and, you know, use whatever you can in your hand to dig for some Venusaurs and some energy cards. But even when you have Venusaur, like I say, if you are missing your energies early, although you are a big sponge that likes to take hits and, you know, the whole deck is equipped for it, you basically, a lot of the time, need your GX attack for your first Venusaur a lot of the time, for the heal, just to keep you in the game, to buy you time. And if you're missing energies early, it makes life very difficult for you. So the fragile openers for Celebi is another awkward thing about it. But overall, I think the deck is not meme tier garbage. I think it's got to be cleverly played for the right tournaments, but it's definitely worth experimenting about, and I think it's definitely cool for myself to try out a new engine with the deck. I think the PokeNav is definitely very, very strong. The lookers I can be convinced off of, to be honest. Like, I could see myself just playing Erica's Hospitality or a more standard draw supporter, but I do like accumulating cards with this deck rather than shuffle draw, so I don't think I'd ever play Cynthia. I think the Erica is not a bad fit, to be fair. But for now, I just wanted to try out the Lookers engine because there's some great synergies with the whistles, especially after you use your GX attack. You can pull them straight back out and start drawing again. So it's like your first Looker is like you've drawn 5 cards that turn. And because the deck has so much cycle, you don't really care what cards you're drawing into because so many of them are just more cards that say draw on them anyway. So even though you're drawing a low amount of cards, the cards you draw oftentimes draw you more. So that's what's really cool. And the deck has just so many item cards. It's such a breath of fresh air, even though it is kind of like an annoying approach where you're just doing some slow, sort of tanky stuff and just denying what your opponent's doing. And you'll probably be upsetting a few people when you play Celebi&Venusaur if you just have a good matchup against them. It's pretty interesting and really, really different from any other deck we've seen for a long time. So it was really cool to profile this one and start testing it. So let me know what you guys think about my list. And let me know what you guys think about the archetype. Am I calling it right? Am I calling it wrong? Is the list right? Did you think about trying some of these cool things? Or is it just wild and I should take Looker around my deck because it's not seen play before? And I've gone down this road with Looker before. I've overvalued him at times. I remember when the card first came out, I thought about a Rangaroo Lock deck with Looker. But that's not happening. And maybe I'm trying to sneak him into a deck just because I have a soft spot for the card. But let me know down below. For now, it has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll see you for another Team Up deck analysis tomorrow. Cheers.